Hello and welcome to the meeting room. I'm Paul Harvey. We're diving into a topic today that stirs up a lot of opinions, the next generation of event professionals. From claims that young people expect too much too soon, to the idea that most of us just fell into the industry, we're asking the big questions about how to attract, retain and develop talent in the event sector. Joining me today, a specialist recruiter for the event sector, Robert Kenwood, and founder of AMT Events, Anna-Marie Trzebinski, who bring their unique perspectives and plenty of experience to the conversation. Let's get into it. Now, I was just saying, Robert, we so often hear that people just fell into the event sector. Should we be doing more to persuade young people to proactively choose our industry? And if so, what?
It's almost like a rite of passage when you talk to people, isn't it? How did you get in? And if you don't say fell into it, it's quite unusual. But I think we have, since the pandemic, not really taken advantage of what was a massive light being shone on us. Okay. You know, if you think about during the pandemic, you know, it was nothing, was it? We were not seen as anything, and then suddenly we're now a 100 billion industry. And I think we haven't done enough to really focus on how do we show our industry as £100 billion to the economy and as a career of choice. You know, I think there's quite a lot where we're still quite happy to be fluffy and pink, or you know, I've been doing this 20-something years, and I'm still my parents haven't got a clue what I do, you know, in events. So I don't think there's enough real like we are a career of choice. I think it's, and I sometimes think saying we fell into it actually sort of is quite derogatory. It makes it feel like, well, it's just easy, you can fall into it. And I think that's why we lose people, if I'm honest, because it's easy to fall into and easy to fall out. So I think there are things, especially government, that we're doing, things like Power Events, the work you're doing and other media companies, but I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be around that sort of table of this is a place you could go and have a career long term.
Anna-Marie, do you think we need to proactively persuade people to join the industry? Is that something we should be doing?
Picking up on something that Robert said, I think we are actually very much ahead of other industries, but other industries, I think a lot of people don't know what anybody does. You know, when you speak to your friends, when you speak to your parents. So we've got lots of similarities there. But for me, I actually think, I fell into the events industry. I went into fashion, I was styling, and then I got into fashion events. And through that, I then went into the corporate route. So I did find events through, a funny means and just love them. But then obviously you tailor your skill set. And that now was over 15 years ago. And I think at the time, events titles didn't exist. They just kind of, what do you do? Like, it was that kind of, really, that's a job? And I feel like we have come on miles since then. And because of that, we have made a lot of progress. So even though we're not 100%, where we want to be necessarily, and we're always looking to improve, looking at the progress we have made, I think we're an industry, people know about us. There are amazing degrees that there weren't before. And there was a question at one point whether you need an events degree because it is very proactive and experience-based. But with technology advances, AI, sustainability, all of these processes and these training are crucial and really valuable to event agencies and professionals. And I think now we do actually have a layer of people coming into our industry and looking for events roles that we didn't have before.
I mentioned it in the intro. We have heard some people suggest that maybe early career event professionals expect too much too quickly. Has this been your experience?
I have my opinions, but I also wanted to see kind of what's going on within agencies, from freelancers. And there is still, from the employment side, an underlying, I would say, judgment that, there's this expectation of instantaneous success and seniority. I don't think that is necessarily a correct judgment. I think it's probably a bit of a tired time, like storyline at the moment. I think looking at generations, no one is the same. So you can't expect the same from each generation. And Gen Z, let's take them. Coming into our industry, they've had a completely different conditioning to any of us with technology, with instant gratification, and then coming into our industry and being quite confident because they've had to build themselves up through, growing up in this environment. their confidence is knocked. And then we're actually kind of saying, well, that's not okay. And I think rather than saying this is a problem, we need to say, actually, how can we change and support them better? And I think there are a lot of companies doing that now. And, some of the feedback that I've got from some of the agencies are simple things like, okay, let's have a look and have a discussion at the beginning of the week and make 4 target priorities for this week. If you get them done by 1 p.m. on Friday, you can go off at 1 p.m. on Friday. That's great because it gives goals, it gives purpose, but then the business is actually seeing the results that they need. So, and I think items like that, but then also applying them to the entire agency, not just the newbies, because it has to be fair for everybody. This is the events industry moving forward.
Robert, what would you make of young people coming into the industry and their expectations?
I think if you look at the pipeline, the problem for me happens after people start. You're absolutely right. There's a real great, a lot of work being done on, hello, we're over here, come join us. But then when people come join us, then what? And that, I think, is where we lose people, because we promote, we advertise, come and be part of this wonderful industry. And then people come in, it's like, well, there you go, get on with it. And if you think about younger generation now, they're coming into an environment that we never had. They're not seeing the line managers all the time. They're not seeing their peers, their friends. They're not having those interactions. So they're coming in, whatever the expectation level is, and I'll get onto that in a second, but they're coming in saying, okay, great, I'm here now. You've got me. What now? And we'll just get on with it. And there's a lot of companies, employers who, I'd say a third of the people I speak to have got it absolutely nailed. Progression plans, pathways, salary sort of expectations, exactly as you said, do this, get that. But I think you've got to remember that the generation coming to work now, and this is going to sound really old man of me, they had it actually harder than I had it coming in. There's been a pandemic, there's been social media. Social media wasn't around like it was when I was starting, and social media is awful as well as being okay. It sounds terrible. There's been, 1-2 recessions since the pandemic, unofficially, but really we all know there's been recessions, plus 1 or 2 wars thrown in. So we're saying to people, come in and be keen, want to come and work for this industry, and then saying, well, yeah, not too keen. Don't be too keen. Don't want too much. So I think there's a bit in between. And honestly, as you know, Paul, I spend half my day talking to senior stakeholders and the other half talking to agency owners. And I think there's a bit of envy there from I'm 50 next year in May, and I think there's a bit of envy. I was talking to your colleague earlier about Brighton. There's lots of people now living in Brighton who can work in London, and I live in Brighton, hate the fact that I never had that opportunity because, that wasn't around for me. So I think there's a fine line between what are we doing when they're here, and also it's down to employers to support them. It's not up to the people coming into the industry. It's up to us. Older generation, that sounds awful. Yeah, it's up to us to say, right, we'll put the ladder down, we'll help you, we'll progress you because we want you to stay. Because otherwise what happens is everyone then goes, oh, there's a talent shortage. Yeah, so how can there be there's not a talent shortage. There's a shortage of realisation or expectation, but you can't have all these people coming in and then say, right, get on with it, and now you haven't done it. So yeah, that's the thing for me. And we've heard that too lazy or too keen, or it's just rubbish. It's just every generation says the generation after me has it easier than I do. That's just, you speak to your parents, your grandparents, we've all got it easy according to them.
You see a lot of stories in the press about Gen Zs kind of not being kind of suited to the workplace and kind of upsetting people in the workplace, and very often it's exactly the same stories that you saw 15 years ago when millennials were entering the workplace. Is it just whipped up by the media to some extent?
I'm not blaming media because that does sound really old man of me, but there's so many channels now for us to get content that you're not going to get content. We've always talked about the news. Do you remember there used to be, you wouldn't watch a news at 10 o'clock if everything they said was positive. No one would watch it. There's a reason at the end of the news it's the really good bit. Content now is, I want you to click on this link.
Everything comes round again in all manners, and this is exactly the same. It's a storyline. I graduated in a recession. I do think it's difficult now, but I think it's always been difficult for different reasons for different people, and it's just the new challenges and how we address them. I'm a massive fan of Simon Sinek. lots of people are. But for me, it's mainly because a lot of what he says actually resonates with me and my own values and my own beliefs. And that is around pure friendship and kindness in our industry. And I love, you know me, I'm quite social in the industry. I like building relationships. That isn't a fakeness. That is a real, genuine want to connect with people, to enjoy my role, because I love events and I want to be surrounded by people that I love working with. And that friendship in return gives me, connection, a purpose. And I feel that that is very much the same as younger generation, looking for connection, purpose. And if they can understand that through friendship, which is very underrated, friendship, everybody teaches us how to do leadership, parenting, being good partners. But who teaches us to be a good friend? And, the fundamentals of that really embrace friendship and mental health, and that ultimately will create a great environment for efficiency and productivity. So for me, I think, because I've had my issues freelancing, learning in the first 5 years of AMT Events, I've taken it on my shoulders really hard. I've done kind of what can I do better, and really it just requires a bit of research, going back to the drawing table and kind of going, well, what do I believe in and what do I want this agency to be? And for me, going back to the purpose of friendship connection will hopefully kind of make sure that we grow an environment that's really welcoming.
Does there need to be a shift in mentality, maybe including more kind of focus on friendship and well-being and things like that? What do you think?
I think a focus on well-being it should just be a given, just like hybrid is a working model or remote. And I think just touching on what Anna-Marie said about friendship, I think that also bleeds into the community aspect. And we were talking off camera about the community you set up, and you think of all the stories, but the positive stories that came out of that, And I think it's that thing there, though, about tempering expectation going into a workforce from either friends, referrals, university, falling into it. There's nobody there saying, and this goes back to what workplace should do. Workplace should be saying, where do you want to go? What is it you want to do? And we will help you get there. Because if you just try and put people in a box and go, you're a Progco, this is how you get to a senior account director, they might actually want to go into multimedia production. You don't know if you don't ask. And I think we're still trying to, and it's not that employers are wrong, by the way, we're still trying to deal with the fallout of the pandemic in this new world, which we never had, or bosses of agencies never had. But there are, simple things that employers could do, which is, things like bringing in the next generation into decision makings, for example. So you've heard about shadow boards. I think, it's a thing that people are doing now in associations. But I think if you're an employer and you have your board who've been there 15, 20 years, and then you have your senior leadership team who've been there 10 or 15 years, how, if there's not representation on that board, are the next generation going to think you understand their needs? So if there isn't, and I'm not talking like token young person, stick them on a board or stick them on a show, but those companies, those progressive companies doing that, they're going to reap the rewards, same as with diversity. And I know we're talking specifically about younger people, but if people can't see someone that looks like them, A, you're going to miss out on talent in the first place. B, that talent isn't going to stay with you. And C, Jesus Christ, it's 2025. Yeah. It can't be run by middle-aged, middle-class white men. We have to look at that and say, we moan about a pipeline, we have the pipeline. I do a lot of work with universities on the REACH scholarship, and these universities are saying, we've got loads of people applying for, and I know that's specifically degrees, but they're saying we've got loads of people applying. What we don't have is enough work for them afterwards. Yeah. So how can we have a problem with the pipeline? What we have a problem with is who's integrating, who's supporting, and I think that for me is asking questions.
I think that really highlights as well for me that actually we've come a long way again, because the event industry, when I was kind of first brought in, was very rigid. You were a venue, you were a supplier, you were an agent, or you were a corporate. There was no crossing over. And if you did want to cross over, it was very difficult to. You kind of got put in a box, and, recruiters would only send you certain roles, or you kind of just got discounted if that wasn't your whole experience. I managed to bridge it, but it was very, very difficult. And I actually had to move from Essex to Birmingham to do it, and then back down to London years later. And it's exactly the same with various roles within the events agency or corporate world. You know, how can we expect people to know what they like if they're not able to go, actually, I'm going to go into logistics? Oh, no, this isn't working for me. But is there room for me to kind of go into an account management side? Or do I like more of the creative side and concept work? You know, it's that opportunity of allowing people to breathe is going to make us successful. And rather than saying, actually, this person isn't great for our company or this isn't right for the role, and just dismissing them, why do not look at other alternatives? And I think that is definitely coming through now, because, you know, I've seen people being transferred from corporate to agency, and the transferable skills are being recognised. And that is giving a lot more opportunity, I think, especially with forward thinking about, you know, what do I want out of the events industry as a whole? Do we have that flexibility for the new workforce coming in? And yeah, I'm very pro events industry and how far we've come.
But that's interesting, the flexibility bit. I mean, I still hear from both, you know, newcomers and agency owners, and I only deal with senior roles, so I don't, you know, work at that level. But every time I'm speaking, I always see, you know, we're offering basically bare minimum living wage, and we want 2 years events experience. And it's like, what? That's not flexible, you know. And I think at some point you have to realise that, you know, and you'll get people buying into you, by the way, if you give them the training, if you give them that support. You know, most younger people, or most sort of jobs up till line manager type roles, you know, they're 18 months to 2 years. That is a stint. 18 and different. My year was 3 years. Now it's 18 months to 2 years. If you're not doing something with somebody different in 18 months to 2 years, they're going to look around. You know, and that comes on the employer. So if you're looking after someone and taking them through your business, but you have to have the flexibility in the first place to realise somebody's not going to have 2 years worth of experience. And if they are, they want more than, what is it now, 25 or 28,000, whatever you know. So that's the bit we need to look at as well.
And I 100% agree and understand that. And the living costs, you know, that is, you know, shocking, looking at various different elements and rent and everything else. But again, I would also go back to 15 years ago. I'm sounding old now. Different industry, fashion industry, but even trying to get into the events industry without going corporate. You know, I worked in fashion. It wasn't right, but I worked in fashion for 2 years, more or less for free on expenses. That is unheard of now because there are policies in place and it's illegal. But it should have been illegal then. So I think, again, it's just looking at, it's not ideal, but there's so many different companies, large, medium, startups, which startup business from an employer perspective, it's a really difficult space to be in. You know, it's a difficult balance. It's just striving to improve, I think, that will take us forward.
People talk about a candidate or an employer-led market. There is no such thing as a market. There might be more people looking for jobs or not looking, but every recruitment market is driven by an employer. Like, they're the people that pay the money. So the employer has the ultimate responsibility. It's the employer that needs to stop thinking, oh, in my day or when it's tough. Like, it's happened, we are here now. And there's many things I don't agree with now, but we're here now and we have to move forward.
You can't be stagnant.
Exactly.
You have to move forward.
Great word.
Essentially saying the world of work and the workplace has changed a lot in the last 15 years.
Last
just got to roll with it. 5 years.
That's true.
Last 5 years,
last
it's probably
5 years.
accelerated 20 years minimum.
Is that the working from home?
And the mental health aspect that Anna-Marie mentioned earlier is fantastic. And I think that because of population in the UK, because of what's happening, at some point it was going to get to a stage of, we can't keep bringing everybody into these major towns, like transportation, accommodation. It just wasn't going to happen. So I think where we are now would have happened, but it would have happened in 20 years' time. So I think, trying to take a positive from the pandemic, it's been great that it's like, you know, I dropped my kids off this morning before coming up here. Great. And I'm going to go back and pick them up. You know, that would never happen if I had to work in an office, you know, but even now you can do that because I'll just take that and maybe tomorrow work longer. Yeah. But I think the mental health aspect, you know, mental health in my day was, you know, you did ask a question. It was like, well, you're weak, especially as, and I don't mean this to be a gender thing, but as a guy, it was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. You know, and like you said earlier about, you know, I went what you said earlier, if there was a woman in your situation saying, actually, I'm going to stay at home today, I'm not feeling great. She's not as into the company as anyone else. And if I said I was feeling a bit low and I wanted to be by myself, we need to get rid of it. So I think there are some huge positives to come out. And you're a positive as well. People like yourself, and I think you had Lizzie on from Oddity. You might not have set up a business on your own if it wasn't for the pandemic. I think there's some positives there, but going back to your point, it is on employers. You cannot just say everyone's lazy or everyone wants anything, because if that is actually the case, then you have intel. And what you do with intel and data, you use it to your advantage. You don't say, well, that's over there. Well, if that's what the option is, you have to change. So change.
I'm thinking about what you were saying as well about working from home, and obviously it's great for kind of people who are established in the roles like you and I, kind of working from where we can work from home and pick up our kids and things like that. If you're a young person coming into the industry and you're working from home, you're sitting at home in front of your laptop with no kind of office kind of atmosphere, is it any wonder that you don't have a realistic expectation and realistic experience of what the workplace is? Do you think that's fair?
Going back to my point earlier, that's not down to us. That's down to the employee's choice. Like, if you're asking an employee, how do you want to work? If an employee says, I work much better at home on my own, great, work at home, maybe come in once a fortnight. I'm a big fan of things like the 4-day working week. I'm a big fan of the 6-hour day. I'm a big fan of, actually looking at it on a project output basis rather than how many hours are you doing. So I think going back to your point, you can't just say everybody feels this way. Now, I know if you've got 150 employees, it's hard to ask 150 employees how. But if you ask as a overall, what do people prefer, you're going to get a sort of... people will come to you and go, well, 60% of people actually want to work from home 5 days a week. Why would you not then let those people work from home 5 days a week? And you're absolutely right. We are seeing now, especially at the senior level. So when I say senior, I mean sort of managers of people, director and C-suite, absolute flooding back to the offices, want to be in an office, struggling to deal with teams because they never see the teams. It doesn't mean they have to then call those teams into the office, because you lose people. So I think I 100% get your point, and I'm not saying we should all be, you tell us how to employ you, but if you're not listening to your team or what the market is saying, you are going to get left behind, and you will get left behind.
I think it is interesting though on the reality part of things and kind of what they want. I don't think you can sugarcoat the events industry, and I think there was a phase of that. I think there's definitely kind of a step back from that now, but it was that storyline of we need more talent, we need more people, where can we recruit them from, how can we attract them? And ultimately I love to work with people that love events, and you can't really say that this is an apple when it's a banana. If you like. There are additional hours that you might be working in the evening or the weekends. Depends what type of events you're working with, but I think it's really important to be upfront and honest and set those expectations in advance, and then counterbalance that with, but actually we offer time in lieu, or we offer the additional pay. Some people I've seen are offering both and giving it as a choice. And there are a lot of perks that go on social media or company brands and websites, and that is great. But that is also because there's a lot of hard work that goes in behind the scenes, and it's not just about the perks. It is about the hard graft, the expertise, the skill set, and the passion. And I think you need to, again, just set those boundaries right from the start so that when people do come in, they aren't thinking, actually, this isn't what I was told. And that's been a problem, I think.
So I disagree with you a little bit, only a little bit, because I think that badge of honour that we all used to have, I worked 60-hour weeks, I work 6 days a week, I haven't had a holiday. Those badge of honours have to be outdated. If we're talking to people saying, you're going to work evenings, you're going to work weekends, you're going to do this, first of all, that's not understanding the audience coming in, because there are people then that will go, well, I don't want to do that. And for me, and I know as an employer this, but when I talk to, it's tough because obviously most of my stuff is senior, but even when I'm talking to senior leaders about their teams, it's about saying, well, that actually falls with you. Because if you've got, when I worked PAYE before, I had a team of 22 people, right? And people would say to me, oh, I've worked 60 hours this week. As their line manager, I would take that as I've screwed up. I have screwed up. If you're working 60 hours, either I've screwed up or you're not good enough to do your job in the time that we're paying you. That was how I approached things. It wasn't people saying, well done, you've done 60 hours, have a good weekend. And I think that badge of honour, every job out there, there's going to be a bit of late nights. But I think if we keep tacking that on as almost like part of the job description, one, we're going to scare people away. Two, when they come in and you'll say, well, you knew it would be hard work. So now that one evening a week becomes 3 evenings a week. So we'll lose people. And again, I think for me, it's about employers realising that it is different to how it was in our day.
Yeah, but it's not a badge of honour that I'm talking about. I'm talking about having those boundaries, and you're right 100% about 60-hour weeks and everything else. But, there's no lying that incentives are probably going to cut into your own time. You're going to be there overnight. You might be there on the weekend. If you work with B2B corporates, maybe your events are probably Monday to Friday, but there's going to be evening events. There's always going to be that area where it steps outside your 9 to 5. And, I think it's about educating about what different events require, what different kind of events roles are going to be looking at. I speak to a lot of venue managers, and some have stepped away from the roles because they're in all the time consistently for client events, and it doesn't suit their schedule, especially if they're young families and new mums. But again, it's like, how can you avoid that if you are a venue manager and you have client events? So it's not about a badge of honour necessarily, but I think it's definitely about education around the different types of events and the different sections of the events industry to allow them to kind of come in and actually know what the expectation is.
And education's the absolute massive key word, but also a lot of it is done verbally. So for me, if you are expected to do, say like, I don't know, on average you're going to do 10 hours extra overtime and we do this in lieu, then it needs to be in the job description. Yeah. It needs to be in the role profile, contracted, this is what you have to do. But a lot of it is done over a table saying, don't worry, like we'll give you time off. And then what happens is they go, oh, where's that time off? I don't have time because we're now in silly season. Yeah. Then we're into Christmas. Then we're into the beginning of the year. So I think if it's not contractual and if you haven't had that, like, this is what I have said, do you agree to that? Yeah. That's why people go, well, hang on, I'm doing this. Yeah. And that's where I think with employers, you're like, well, actually, we told you this. Yeah. There you have, for me, I'm absolutely with you. But I think we do it on the sort of, it used to be when I was working in the industry, going to events was the other thing. Oh, don't worry, everything like free drink, free food, you'll be wined and dined, and that was the sell. That was the like, come on, now obviously again, God, that sounds awful, things have changed, and rightly so. Alcohol shouldn't be something as a driver, but that was our badge of honour. You'll be out 3 or 4 nights a week. But if something like that's not is this part of my job? Am I supposed to do this? Because if you don't do it, everyone goes, oh, they weren't at the event, they didn't come, they don't care. That's where we're going to lose people again. And we talked about mental health. You can't work 60, 70 hours a week. That's just not feasible.
Well, in the events industry as well, we get invited to a lot of events. If you're looking to get more experience, then having that passion that drives you to learn more, go to the event and learn about how the event's been run. How are they doing registration? What's the layout like? How many people have they got here? Is this venue good? Use it as a research opportunity. And, seeing that passion, yes, you shouldn't be judged if you can't go. If you can't go, then there's reasons or, many reasons personally and in people's lives why they might not be able to go. But for people that want more experience and are looking for that research, take these event invites as a real pro for kind of moving your career forward and your knowledge base, because that's what I used to do. I used to be out like 4 nights a week. Not anymore.
We're talking about young people in the industry. I wanted to throw this in there. Is nepotism an issue in the industry?
I don't think it is. I haven't personally come across it. I did have it quite a severe kind of issue with it in the fashion industry. This was, again, I say 15 years ago. But if I didn't have a European accent, if I didn't speak another language, if I didn't have a double-barrel name or a family member in the company, then I wasn't getting an interview. That was very rife. We've moved on from that, and personally I haven't seen it in the events industry. There are a lot of family businesses in our industry, and I actually don't have any issue with somebody building their own company and then making it a family environment and giving their own family members that opportunity. Because ultimately, I mean, take AMT Events. I've found out recently through a lot of coaching that statistically most people that make an agency do have a sell by date and they want to sell it on. I established I'm in a very small percentage because I want to keep my agency and I want to be able to give my children that opportunity if they want to go into the events industry, because they might want to go into events, but they also might want to go into accounting or marketing or graphics, and we offer all those roles. And if I can give my children that better introduction and opportunity to a career, then why not enable that platform?
I think it's not as bad as it was. I think that's, for me, down to financial restrictions. I think workforce is leaner. You used to maybe have 7 people in the department. Now you can only have 2 headcount. So before it used to be the CEO's son would sit over there doing a bit of filming, bit of editing, and no one used to know what they did, sort of thing. I do think, though, there's the difference between giving a family member a leg up, but then they need to produce. But for me, the problem has moved from nepotism to things like favoritism and mates of mates coming into, like, that to me is now the biggest problem over nepotism. Is the new nepotism is, and I understand why I'm going to sound like a recruiter, because I want the fee and that's all we care about apparently. But, you know, lots of people are employing, saying, well, so-and-so recommended this person, so I gave them a job. Now, that's not nepotism as such, but it is a form of, well, I was told you're great, so I'm going to bring you in. And that is, to me, the single biggest issue with our industry, because we're never going to say no to a mate's mate. And if you look at the attrition rates, it's something like 2 years max. Because what happens is that person's looking, so I'm going off on a tangent, but the amount of horror stories I hear from, oh yeah, no, we tried them and they weren't really, and also that affects diversity. You know, if you're recruiting mates of mates, well, you're not going to have a diverse team at all, because there are all those people around.
It can go either way. It's either really great because you're working really well with this person, they have a sound understanding of character. Personality mixes are crucial in a team, especially when you're working so close together. So that then could really make a mix thrive, and everybody kind of understand how each other works, can take you, 4 weeks ahead straight away. But then you've got the unknown background of not knowing what is their history together, how do they work together, and you're bringing also that environment into your environment, and you don't really know how that's going to affect the wider group and what that mix is. And I think it just boils down to, yes, you can get the referrals, which you might call favoritism, but then it's about doing your own usual process of really understanding, actually, are they going to fit with our team? And, do they have this correct skill set or event background that we're looking specifically for this role? But I do agree with you. It's a bit of a fine balance.
And there's also a huge difference between, we're an actual family-run business and we're like a family. Because whenever I see companies saying we're like a family, it's like, run away from that as quickly. Because it's called work because you wouldn't do it for free. And these people aren't your family.
Wow, we'll have to watch out for that. Yeah. But we've run out of time, I'm afraid. But thank you very much for joining me, Anna-Marie and Robert. And it's been a fantastic discussion. And thanks for joining me in the meeting room.